Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Depends obviously when you're picking up the video. Welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation. I'm Owen James and this is your latest Rangers news. Guys, what is up? It is Friday? It's Friday. It's Friday the 13th. Oh my God, it's Friday the 13th. Who's not going out today because it's Friday the 13th? I must admit, my ex-wife, her grandfather, he would never even leave the house on Friday the 13th. He literally wouldn't leave the house. He'd actually come, get out of bed, he'd sit in his chair, rather than going to the kitchen to get a drink or some food, he literally would not move from those two places until Friday the 13th was over. He was so superstitious about it. Got to say, don't buy into any of those Friday the 13th superstitions. Why? Because I'm not a Knights Templar, so I ain't worried about Friday the 13th because I'm not likely to be burnt at the stake or hung as a heretic or anything like that. So there we go. So I'm not particularly worried. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the Knights Templar or history. We're here to talk about all things Glasgow Rangers. Look, what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk a bit of Mulligan. We're going to talk a bit of Miller. We're going to talk a bit of Miovski. I've also got a bit of a Cyril Dessers exclusive as well for you from some sources close to AEK Athens. I was talking to someone who is in the know when it comes to AEK and got a bit of an exclusive on the old Cyril Dessers transfer. So hang on for that. That is upcoming. So please hang on for that. Now, right, let's talk a little bit, obviously, of transfer news. So look, it is transfer silly season. It's June. It's the 13th of June. 13th of June. It's the 13th of June, and we are into transfer city season. Obviously, the season is done and dusted. It's in the long memories past, and hopefully, we've all cast it aside and kind of just tried to forget about the horrificness of last season. It's kind of sad, isn't it, when one of the main highlights of last season is obviously the fact that Celtic lost the cup final to Aberdeen. I mean, I don't know about you, but that cup final was one of those ones where I actually wanted both teams to lose. But there we go. We're going to talk about possible move for Bojan Miovski, which has kind of come to light over recent sort of days. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we're going to talk obviously a bit about the more concrete rumour that is going round at this moment in time as regards Josh Mulligan. Josh Mulligan is the young lad who is from Dundee out of contract. There will, however, be a compensation fee to pay for the player, as there is for Lyle Cameron. Two Dundee players coming in to the squad. That's pretty interesting. I've got to say, before we talk about Josh Mulligan, I just want to kind of address something. Now, what I've heard, and this is just what I've heard from a lot of Rangers fans is we need more Scottish players. We need a Scottish core. We need more Scottish players. We need more young Scottish talent in our team. Okay, so look, it looks like we're going to go and get someone who is Scottish and he is young, he's up and coming, he's talented, 22, I think he's 22 years old, and is a Scottish player. And all I'm hearing now is, oh, that's pretty shit, isn't it? We're getting someone from Dundee. Oh, that's it, 2 signings from Dundee. We're going to do amazing next season with all these Dundee players, aren't we? I mean, oh my God, you can't have it both ways. You can't have more Scottish players and then actually sign some Scottish players and then not like the Scottish players that you've got because of the club they've come from. Well, look, who did you want the Scottish players to come from? Juventus? It ain't gonna happen, mate, you know. And look, yes, there are Scottish players that play in better leagues and abroad. Lewis Ferguson, for example, Scott McTominay, Billy Gilmore, Doig. I got news for you guys. With the first 3 especially, they ain't coming to Rangers. They're not coming back to Scotland because they're getting paid a shit ton of money to play in Serie A, to play Champions League football, to win Serie A. They ain't coming back to Scotland anytime soon, so we can forget those names. We can forget even any sort of interest in McTominay, Gilmore, or Ferguson. It ain't happening. So look, the likes of Josh Mulligan, the likes of Lyle Cameron, the likes of Lennon Miller, that is where we're at. That is where we're shopping. We deal with it, guys. Look, we'd all love to go and do our weekly food shop in Waitrose or our weekly food shop in Fortnum and Mason's. That's a posh shop in London, for those of you who don't know, or in Harrods. But it ain't possible because we don't earn that sort of money. So we're not going to go there, guys. So look, Josh Mulligan is a good footballer. He's a talented footballer. He is young, he's fit, he's fast, he's aggressive. He is a talented player. He can play a number of positions. As I said on the TikTok video earlier that I put out, he's a bit Scottish Dujon Sterling, but stays fit. He's kind of a McSterling, which sounds like something you should order from McDonald's, doesn't it? In terms of the guy's stats from this season, Josh Mulligan, he's played 29 times in the SPL for Dundee, had 5 assists and 5 yellow cards, played in 73% of Dundee's starting 11s and 75% of the minutes, and had a 10% goal participation rate for Dundee. He played in 5 League Cup ties, playing in 17% of the starting 11s. He played in 33% of the minutes. The Premiership relegation struggle, because of course they were in the bottom 6, not the top 6. He played 5 times in there, played every single game and every single minute of those 5 games. And in the SFA Cup, he made 2 appearances, playing 67% of the starting 11s and 67% of the minutes. He's listed primarily on Transfer Market as a right midfielder, and a lot of people have talked about him actually playing as a midfielder, but he's also a right back as well and a centre midfielder, so he can play, like I said, in a number of positions. A lot of people see him as fitting in as a right back in Russell Martin's team. Why? Because he's a ball playing right back. He can pass the ball out from the back. He can bring the ball out from the back. He can invert, which is something that Russell Martin likes to do. He likes to use his fullbacks inverted. He can do that because he can play in midfield. So at the end of the day, that's Fabrizio Romano, by the way. Nothing interesting for us. All about Juventus and bloody Trent Alexander-Arnold. So there you go. So look, he is, like I said, a very talented young player. Someone I think has got a huge, huge future. Compensation fee, I think, is around £1 million. That's what we're going to pay for the compensation fee for him. His contract expired on May the 31st, 2025. But as I said, because he's a youth product, because he's come through the youth systems, he is eligible for that youth sort of payment back to encourage people to foster their own young players. He obviously came for Dundee Youth Team. He had a loan spell at Cove Rangers, a loan spell at Peterhead, before obviously breaking into the Dundee first team. He's certainly someone I think could come straight in. I honestly think that this lad could start. I think he's done that in the SPL. He's played in the SPL already. He's more than fairly acquitted himself in the SPL. Like I said, he's fast, he's strong, he's healthy, he gets forward well, he also defends well. He basically does everything that we want James Tavernier to do that James Tavernier doesn't do very well. I mean, James Tavernier, don't get me wrong, is good going forward, but is absolutely shite defending because he can't tackle, he loses his one-on-ones, he loses his aerial duels, he gets dribbled past an awful lot, he goes missing, his positional play at the back post is appalling. All these things. And look, I don't know, I'm going to offend some of the TAV fanboys out there, the ones that think that this team should be called TAV FC. But, Josh Mulligan, I think, is a better bet to start, because this is someone who we can start to build a back four together, and like I said, he's a good player, and I think the decision to sign him is definitely the right one. Now, obviously, we're looking for official confirmation of that story from the club, but that is the one that is obviously the first one that seems to be the first Russell Martin signing. And who'd have guessed that first signing could be a right back, given all the links to strikers and central defenders. I mean, I think at one point, to me, it seemed like Connor Cody was the big favourite to be the first signing, maybe even backed up by Dor Turgeman, but it looks like it will be Josh Mulligan, and I think this is a good signing. This is a very good signing. This is a very positive first move from the club. And look, Kevin Thelwell and where's my Ibrox? Someone's robbed my Ibrox sign. Seriously, man, someone has robbed my Ibrox sign. Where the hell's that gone? I'll have to have a look for that because I've got my kits one up. Is up, which my mum bought me, but someone's robbed my Ibrox sign. Mad. Anyway, let's get back to this. Yeah, Josh Mulligan, good signing, good move for the club. I think this is a good first start. And look, Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy apparently have ripped up the Niels Coppen transfer list. They're forming their own transfer list. They're not in the slightest bit interested in who was on Coppen's list, as has obviously been seen by the fact that they didn't sign Umar Kamara, who's now gone to play, I think, in France. He's gone to play in France, I think. Somewhere, or maybe not France, maybe somewhere. I can't remember. He's gone anyway. He's gone to play somewhere. I don't really care where because he's not playing for us. So there we go. Anyway, let's move it along. Lennon Miller. Look, Lennon Miller is someone that a lot of Rangers fans want to sign. There's someone who he's someone who. A lot of Rangers fans think will be an excellent purchase for the club. He's young, he's Scottish, he's talented. Plays for Motherwell, guys. Are we okay with that? Or is that going to be another, we're signing players for Motherwell? Shit, blah, blah, blah. No, he's a good player. He's skillful. He's got a great eye for a pass. Bit of skill in there, quality player. He's done a great job this season when he has been called on from Motherwell. Lennon Miller is a top player. Now, like I said, he's someone that I honestly think that Rangers should be interested in. This is the kind of calibre of player that we genuinely should be looking at. Like I said, this is a lad who has got experience, and he's only 18 years old. And it kind of puts Bailey Rice into a bit of perspective, doesn't it? That Bailey perhaps hasn't lived up to the promise that he had coming out of the Motherwell Youth Academy. He was obviously described as actually a better player than Lennon Miller at one point. But in terms of Lennon this year, he's played 27 times for Motherwell in the SPL. He scored 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 goal contributions in 27. He's played in the League Cup, 7 appearances, 2 goals. Obviously missed the Cup, the SFA Cup through injury. Played in the relegation part of it. Played all 5 games there and had 2 assists, which gives him a season total of 39 games, 4 goals, 8 assists, 12 goal contributions, and over 3,000 minutes of football. Like I said, this is the sort of player that we as a club should be looking at. He is young, Scottish, talented, quality, attacking, aggressive, good on the ball, all sorts of qualities that would very much fit into Russell Martin's system. However, it seems that there doesn't appear to be at the moment any Rangers interest in Lennon Miller. The only documented interest that is currently there in the player is from Celtic, yes, that lot, and Sunderland of the EPL. Now, obviously, they were promoted by beating Sheffield United in the playoffs. At the moment, Miller is saying that he's very much focused on Motherwell, that he's getting ready for the new season with Motherwell. But apparently, Celtic are looking at him, as are Sunderland. Now, also apparently there's been teams on the continent that have looked at Miller. Eintracht Frankfurt from the Bundesliga and Union Saint-Gilloise from the Belgian Premier League. He's going into the final year of his contract, so obviously his value is a little bit diminished because of that, because I know, we all know that you cannot get a maximum value for a player when they're in the last 12 months, because most clubs will then go, well, actually, do you know what, we ain't going to pay you that, so screw you, we're going to wait till he's out of contract. We'll pay you a compensation fee, which will be a hell of a lot less than we're prepared to offer you now. So you either want to get the deal done at a discounted price, or you want to just let him walk for pretty much next to nothing in the summer. I think there is kind of an acceptance that he will be leaving Motherwell this summer. The Motherwell manager said that when he was asked about whether Lennon would stay, he said, you never know. Lennon Miller was also asked about his future, and he said basically that he's got a year left on his contract. He said, so my focus is going back into pre-season, work as hard as I can and get ready for the season. You get these big clubs mentioned, but it's only speculation. You just need to try and focus on what you're doing, and that will take care of itself. So, apparently, Motherwell have already rejected bids from Udinese and Saint-Gilloise of Belgium. We don't know how much those bids have been for. There's no sort of press around that. Rumours are that Sunderland are readying a £6 million bid for the player, obviously newly rich with EPL money. Their owner is also a guy called Kirill Louis Dreyfus, who is the son of the former Marseille president, not the one that was dodgy. They're readying a £6 million bid. Now, look, I honestly believe that £6 million, if that's what it will take to get Motherwell to the table to talk, is something that we realistically could afford. £6 million, I think, is eminently affordable. Now, if you were to weigh up as a player the options of going to Sunderland or going to Rangers, and like I said, at the moment there's kind of no mentioned interest yet there. There's stuff wasn't around January time saying that scouts had watched Lennon Miller, but obviously that was under Niels Koppen. It remains to be seen whether Dan Purdy and Kevin Thelwell have an interest in Lennon Miller. I certainly hope they do, because he's an excellent player. Lennon Miller, like I said, $6 million. You weigh that up and you say, well, that's something we could pay. That's something we could afford. Now, look, I know that Sunderland are probably going to be an opportunity to offer slightly more in wages, given the fact they're an EPL club. But they, like all EPL clubs and like all clubs, are going to be governed by PSR. they can spend 82% of their revenue. Now, given the fact they're newly promoted, their revenue will be nowhere near as high as a lot of the EPL, as the established EPL clubs. So they won't be able to offer perhaps the massive wages that a lot of the EPL clubs will be able to offer. But you also weigh up the two clubs. You weigh up Sunderland versus Rangers. Rangers are a much bigger club, a European club, a big European club. Sunderland are a big English club. Well, they're not. They're a medium-sized English club. In terms of the offer there, you've got European football at Rangers, the possibility of winning trophies every other week, playing in front of 55,000. At Sunderland, you've got 47,500 their ground holds. You've got the possibility of being in a relegation battle and probably ending up playing Championship football again next season. So does Lennon Miller really want to play in the Championship? I suppose he's putting a kind of risk on this, that he plays really well. They go down, but someone from the Premier League comes in and buys him. That's kind of the gamble you take. But in a relegation struggling team, do you look that good? That's a good question. I mean, I honestly believe that the three teams that go up, I think Leeds may stay up because they've got the money backing them, but I genuinely believe that Sunderland and Burnley will go straight back down again, no matter what they do. I just think the gap between the Championship and the EPL is way too big. So, does he want to go to a relegation fodder club, smaller than Rangers, doesn't offer European football, never will offer European football? The second club in their region, obviously they're pretty much half the size of Newcastle United. Whereas, Rangers, you've got a massive club, a European club, a club that plays European football every season, a club that can win trophies, a club that's equally as big, if not bigger, than its regional opponent. So at the end of the day, I think, if Rangers were to get in there, they've got a lot more to offer. And also, Lennon Miller's got to kind of weigh things up. He's 18 years old. He comes to Rangers. He excels. He plays well in the European competitions. He plays well in the Champions. If we get to Champions League or the Europa League, whatever, he plays well in those two competitions. He's going to start to appeal to more people. Which he gets. Say he plays here for 3 years, 4 years, maybe gets to 21, 22. I mean, it's mad to think that he could actually play for 4 years and still maybe 21, 22. And then you can get a move to a bigger Premier League club, a more established Premier League club that's going to come in from a bit like, obviously, Villa, Newcastle, obviously been interested in Nicholas Raskin. So, look, at the end of the day, Miller, to me, would be a fool to go to Sunderland or to go to Celtic, because Celtic are a bunch of, what I think about Celtic, a bunch of absolute weirdos. I mean, look, I think we should be getting in there. I really do. I think this should be a competition that we're kind of looking to get in on and trying to obviously win. I think we've got a lot more to offer than a lot of clubs when it comes to opportunities to excel and really show how good you are. Right, we're going to talk about Dessers in a minute for the Dessers exclusive. Hang on for that. Let's talk a little bit of Bojan Miovski. Now, obviously, when Bojan Miovski was at Aberdeen, he was a player that was widely admired in the SPL. A lot of SPL clubs looked at him, thought he was a good player. Both Celtic and Rangers both looked at him. Reports are that both Old Firm clubs are looking him again this summer. Celtic apparently very interested, on the verge of tabling a bid, according to some sources. But when Miovski left Aberdeen, he kind of showed Aberdeen a little bit of respect. Although why you'd show Aberdeen respect, I don't know. He kind of showed Aberdeen a bit of respect by not joining Rangers or Celtic and going to play in Spain for Girona. It's fair to say his time in Spain has not gone very well. He hasn't got on the best. Now, Girona obviously were a club that that came up. Did well in La Liga in the first season they were up there. We're a club that obviously, I think they played Champions League football last season. Didn't do a great deal in the Champions League. And then this season have finished actually fifth off bottom. They've had a very, very poor season. They've had a really, really poor season. And in the UEFA Champions League, they finished fourth off bottom in the league phase of the Champions League. They had a exceptionally poor season. So, look, he didn't do well there in a struggling team, and that's fine. Miovski is a very talented player. He's quick, he's strong, he's direct. He's a player who can press high. He would fit a lot of what Russell Martin wants from a striker, a guy who's got the aggression, the speed, and the ability to high press. And he knows what the goal is, and he's proven that he can score goals in Scotland. Now, stats. Like I said, we'll start with his stats from this season, and then we'll look at his overall stats. Look, I mean, let's have a little look. So in La Liga, he's played 17 games this season, scored 2 goals, 2 assists, didn't consistently play, only played 876 minutes of football, played 4 Champions League games, played 275 minutes there, played 1 Copa del Rey game, scored 2 goals in that one game, which is pretty impressive. So he's done okay. 25 appearances, 4 goals, 2 assists. In terms of his past, he scored 44 goals in 98 games while he was at Aberdeen, which is a pretty decent return. With them, he's played for MTK Budapest, he's played for Renova, Girona, like I said, we know. That team, I'm not even going to try and Brunica, Strip, Macedonia, Karabag, which I think is a great name for a team, and Robotniki. That's where he's played. He's 25 years old, so he's not exactly getting on in age. He's still got, I think, a couple of years, 2-3 years in his prime. So he's a player that you could bring in if you did then go on to, turn him into you get the striker that he was originally. You probably sell him on for a fairly decent fee in the future. So, Bojan Miovski to me looks another player that I think again we should be looking at. And his actual sell on, his actual market value is actually quite low at the moment. We're talking about £4 or £5 million. It's not a lot of money due to the fact that he hasn't played particularly well this season for Girona. So, this is another one that, again, I honestly think that we should be looking at and having a look at and, saying, is this a player we should be considering? It's a club that's owned by the City Football Group. So, this is Man City, the City Football Group may want to generate a bit of income, especially if the charges go against them. Look, at the end of the day, like I said, Bojan Miovski was someone we all thought was a good player when he was playing in Scotland. He's a player who, if you bought, he wouldn't have to adapt. He knows the league. So again, someone I do think that we should be having a good long look at. And, according to a lot of the reports, we are looking at him and we are considering our options when it comes to Miovski. And like I said, I think he's a player that fits Russell Martin's system. Right, let's talk about Cyril Dessers. So look, all the gossip, and as I released the video the other day, is that AEK Athens are truly serious about Cyril Dessers. They want Cyril Dessers. They think they think he'd fit their team. They think that he would be a good acquisition for them. Now, someone I saw told me that the sporting director from AEK Athens is currently in Scotland, and he is currently talking to Rangers about the possibility of transferring and buying Cyril Dessers. Now, Dessers apparently has indicated that he wants a new challenge, that he wants to go elsewhere, that he wants a new start, that he thinks that Greece and Athens could be the club for him. Like I said, the sporting director is in Scotland and is attempting to finalise the deal for Cyril Dessers. No word yet on a fee. Now, there was stories rumouring around about possible fees. One fee said 5 million, another said 6. Someone said the club were holding out for 8 to 10. Look, I admire what the 49ers Enterprises Andrew Kavanagh are doing. They do seem to be having a value, sticking to the value, and if people can't make that value, they're telling them to basically do one, which, I think is the right way forward. For a long time now, I think that, as a club, we've been taken advantage of. We've had to sell players, and people have known we've had to sell players, and we've let them go for next to nothing. I think you've only got to look at the last transfer window to see that we generated very little money for the players we got rid of, and it was pathetic. The money we got for Cantwell and Goldson and others and Lammers was way under what we should have actually got for them in the end. So, that was just poor negotiation, poor work from the football board, and I think that won't happen again. I think Kevin Thelwell is a very savvy operator, as is Dan Purdy, as are the 49ers. So I do think those days are gone now. However, I do think 8 to 10 million for Dessers is very unrealistic because of his age, because of the fact that, at 31, he realistically is not going to get a lot better. Now, the talk that I'm hearing, however, is that AEK Athens are prepared to bid somewhere between 5 to 6 million pounds for him and then have add-ons and a sell-on. Now, the sell-on I don't think will be particularly attractive, because I don't think this is a player that's going to be transferred for a fortune in a few years' time. He may be transferred, but not for a massive amount of money. But add-ons, in terms of bonuses, in terms of if this happens, that you get this money. If this happens, that gets money. So I do think that's a more attractive. Now, it could be that they put in place a package where it's 5 to 6 million, possibly rising to 8 to 9 million if certain bonuses levels are met. So I do think that is a possibility. So if we could generate 5 to 6 million in cash payment for Dessers, the transfer fee, I think that would be a very good piece of business. Now, people talk about, but you've got to get 50 goals back, that you've missed. Well, look, we're looking at strikers. We're looking at Turgeman, Freegan, Miovski. We've got Hamza, who I think, if you're playing through the middle, will score goals. He scored 16 goals last season, and the majority of the time he was stuck out on the wing by some absolutely clueless managers who didn't have a clue how to use him. And he's not a winger. He bloody isn't a winger. He's a striker. You wouldn't play, you wouldn't catch, for example, let's take Manchester City. They wouldn't stick Erling Haaland. I'm not saying for a minute Igman's as good as him, but I'm just giving the example. You wouldn't stick Erling Haaland out on the wing. If you saw, you wouldn't get Sporting Lisbon putting Victor Gyökeres out on the wing. That just doesn't work. I do think that Hamza could score 20 plus goals a season easily if he was played through the middle. I think he's got the talent to do that. Now, obviously, there's talk around him exiting the club. Which I'll touch on in a moment. But, this move for Dessers, to me, I think is a really good one for the club. If we can generate between 5 to 6 million plus the bonuses, I think it will be excellent. Absolutely excellent for a player who is not going to develop, who is not going to get any better. And all the biggest Dessers fans surely must realise, once you hit that 30 mark as a striker, it's pretty much a plateau and then a downward curve. You don't get better. There are very few strikers that hit 30 and develop and get better. And Cyril Dessers certainly, I don't think, would have the speed to be able, or the talent to be able to do that. So, look, I think that's an excellent piece of business. And obviously the news that their sporting director is in Scotland looking to close the deal. Hamza Riggerman, obviously, is another one that has come up. He's been attracting interest from Premier League clubs. Everton back in for him. West Ham back in for him, apparently. And Brentford, that's a new name, back in for him. Although Brentford have lost their manager yesterday, Thomas Frank, to Tottenham. Thomas Frank taking the poison chalice that is the Spurs job after Big Fat Ange was sacked. The other clubs that are interested are French clubs. Rennes, Strasbourg, Lens, Lille. I'll tell you what, we'll send him back to London, but they've got to take Cortez back and give us the money. Although I do personally feel that if Igman was to move to one of those clubs, that would show a lack of ambition, because that to me is a backwards move. They are not big clubs. They're not clubs that challenge in France. The French league is weak, and I know our league's weak. I'm not saying it isn't weak, but outside of Paris Saint-Germain, there is no other teams in France. There really isn't. And Marseille, yes, but possibly one or the odd season they play well. Lyon, possibly the odd season, but Paris Saint-Germain dominate and will continue to dominate for the next few years. So I think you talk about Strasbourg, Lille, Lens, Rennes. I mean, they're not big clubs. They're not huge clubs. They're not particularly attractive. I think those would be massive backward moves. And I get, the Moroccan link, French spoken and all that crap. But, if he's looking out for his career, if he is going to move, and look, the fee that I heard mentioned was €15 million, which to me seems way, way too low for someone like Hamza, which is about 12.7 million, 12.9 million pounds. It's a very, very low fee for me for someone as talented as Hamza. I'm looking for 20 million plus for him. So, I think, the EPL clubs are slightly more realistic due to the EPL money, due to the telly, blah, blah, blah. But by the same token, our West Ham, our Everton, our Brentford, any bigger, better offers than what we've got here? Realistically, I don't think so. I think, as well, Hamza needs to look at it like this. I think if he was to stay here for another 12 to 18 months and play through the middle and really impress, he'd have some of the bigger Premier League clubs coming in for him and interested in him. And that's the way he's got to look at it, I think, long term. Right, guys, thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation. Hopefully you've enjoyed the content. I'd love to get your take on all of those stories. Love your take. Thank you for watching. As always, if you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. Please remember, we are the people.